Today I'm going to demonstrate the process that I use to make my textile cuffs. These are some in-progress cuffs. They don't have backs or binding on them yet, but I will show you how I get to this point and how to finish them. When I make my cloth cuffs, I usually start with just a bunch of random scraps and I choose a few that I feel go well together. But first, you'll want to start with a simple base, which can be just about any type of woven or non-stretch fabric because you won't end up seeing it. And I have this simple wrist cuff pattern here, which I will also post to my blog as a free download. But you could also make up your own. So I just trace around and then cut it out. Once I have my basic shape, I'm ready to pick out exactly which fabrics I want to use. So for this particular piece, I'm choosing a mauve velvet as the main fabric. So I'm just placing it down and pinning it and basting loosely around the edges. Then I'll remove the pins and cut away the excess. I didn't go all the way around this because I'm only going to use this part of the velvet. So I've trimmed most of it, and I think I will trim it. We'll do it on the diagonal since that's how I stitched it. And now I'll choose another fabric to go here. I chose this bit of lace and I only want to use part of it, so I just eyeballed it, cut it away, and again pinned it to my fabric where I want it, and I'm going to baste on the edges. Finally, I chose this calico print. I folded the raw edge under and I'm going to overlap it on the raw edge of the other fabrics, pin it down, and stitch around the edge. You can remove your pins. This is still unsewn, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Once again, trim your fabric to match the base of the cuff, and you'll end up with something like this. This is the type of embroidery floss that I like to use. It is 100% cotton, made in France by DMC, and it has a really nice silky texture. And this is the same, more of that embroidery floss that I wrapped around some cardboard. A lot of times when I use this embroidery floss, I will actually divide it up into 2 sets. So there should be 3 strands in each set, or you could do 3 sets of 2 strands if you want something a little thinner. But I find that if you use all 6 together, it can be a little too thick for your project, depending on what you're doing, of course. The next thing I'll do is secure this edge that is not yet stitched down. So I'll just anchor my floss and make some large X stitches. To make my X's, I go diagonal one way, and then I will come back on the other diagonal. After that, I decided to make some French knots along the edge here. To do that, put your needle through your fabric, wrap your floss a few times, either 4 to 6 times or so, and pull it through. I then decided to put a little bit of an accent in the form of this black lace on my cuff, so I just chose a random spot and cut it out, and because it is lace, you don't have to worry about it fraying too badly. And I used a simple whip stitch to secure it down. After that, I decided to make some little rosebuds in the form of French knots, so I chose a rusty colored yarn that complemented the print and just started making a cluster of knots. And each little flower ended up looking like this. After I made the buds, I took some greenish gold embroidery floss and created leaves. I then took a mother of pearl charm with these 2 holes here for jewelry making, and I stitched that down to the cuff as well. Once I'm finished embellishing the front, I choose some fabric for the back lining and I cut it to the same shape as the front of the cuff. So I have this pinned at the back, and I'm going to take some strips of fabric that are about 1.5 inches wide, and I'm going to line up the edge of the strip and the edge of the cuff and stitch all around with about a 5/8 inch seam allowance, and then turn the strip up and around and stitch down to the front of the cuff, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. So first I stitch all along the edge, and when I come to a corner I carefully turn it and move the edge of my binding fabric as well. And just continue all the way around until you get to the end. Now your cuff should look something like this, and before I stitch the binding to the front, I'm going to go ahead and clip the corners here. Now I'm going to start from this open edge and just fold this over and stitch this by hand. And I'm not going to worry about pinning it, I'm just going to hold it with my fingers as I stitch. And once you get to the corner, it should look kind of like this. So again, with your fingers, you can just hold that in a sort of pleat here and continue to stitch around. And your corners should end up looking something like this. As you approach the raw end here, you'll want to fold this part in and then fold the other over, making sure all your raw edges are inside. Then continue stitching until they're secure. This is what it looks like when I'm finished, and I decided to add 2 lobster clasps and a chain for a closure. As you can see, I used the same embroidery floss to stitch those on as well. This is what I ended up with, and it kind of allows for some adjustability as far as the size goes. You could also choose to use something like a button and loop for closure, but I kind of like the chain look. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, if you enjoyed this, go ahead and give it a like, subscribe, and or share with your friends.